Okay, number 11, I've got text 1, text 2. This is going to be a paired passage. And we want to know, how would the author of text 1 most likely respond to the experimental results presented in text 2? Okay, let's see what the ideas of text 1 are, and then we'll look at the experiment. Eurasian plant species that inhabit Western North America have displaced native crops, costing hundreds of millions of dollars annually. The problems caused by such invasive species are the direct result of their success in colonizing new habitats, and understanding why they are so successful is essential to controlling their spread. Okay, we have a problem. We've got invasive plants that are just virally growing everywhere. Of primary interest are two mechanisms of invasion that are particularly well supported by existing studies of plant invasions: release from natural enemies and increased resource availability. So those are two hypotheses. The enemy release hypothesis attributes the success of exotic species to their escape from natural enemies, diseases, and herbivores upon moving to a new range. Okay. So what used to keep them in check back in Asia doesn't, I guess, in North America. So they flourish. The resource hypothesis suggests that plant invasion is caused by the availability of resources such as light, water, and soil nutrients. High resource availability benefits fast-growing native or exotic species. So there's a lot more resources in the new environment than there were in the old. That's why they're flourishing so much. So we've got two different hypotheses. So we've got an experiment. Let's see what the experiment shows. Such and such, an invasive species commonly known as pinweed, has been slowly replacing the native species such and such, or arenbill, in North America's Sonoran Desert. Biologist Sarah Kimball conducted a series of experiments to understand how pinweed plants are overtaking heronbill plants. So the invader is heronbill. The invader here is the pinweed, and it's overtaking the native heronbill. She divided a region where both pinweed and heronbill live into 16 control plots and 16 experimental plots to test susceptibility to insects. The results showed no difference between plots, indicating that insects were not a determining factor in pinweed's mechanism of invasion. Okay, so what does that test tell us? That the invasive species really didn't make a difference there, right? So even if we had a purposely invasive species like a bug in there, it didn't make a difference. Okay. Additional studies by Kimball in the same region measured the growth rates of the two plant species during two growing seasons. She found that the growth rates of the two species were nearly the same in the season 2007 to 8, with close to average annual rainfall, but that the invasive pinweed plants exhibited a greater growth rate than the native heronbill in the season 2004 to 5, so a couple years earlier, when there was much more rainfall than in a typical year. So when there was a lot of water, a lot of resources, the invasive plant took off. Maybe it never received as much water or rainfall in an Asian desert or whatever conditions it was in there. So this suggests the theory up above, the hypothesis of the resource hypothesis, worked or made a difference in this case, and the enemy release hypothesis had little to no effect in this case. Now, again, I don't want to make a valid claim that generalizes these two, because that wouldn't be valid. But in this case, it seemed to be so. So let's see what answer matches that. What would text 2 say about that experiment? Text 2 indicates the resource hypothesis better explains the success of invasive species than the enemy. Well, that would generalize the experiment. I don't think we can do that. I don't think that's valid. Just because it's true here doesn't make it true everywhere. B, text 2 suggests the resource hypothesis lacks sufficient evidence and may not explain the success of invasive plant species. So what does it show? It showed that the resource hypothesis lacks evidence. No, the resource hypothesis was the one that seemed to work. So that it's the invasive species hypothesis that seemed to lack evidence. I don't think that's right. Text 2 indicates that certain hypotheses in text 1 hold merit based on the evidence provided in Kimball's study. Okay, so it's kind of abstract language, but what does this mean? It holds merit. That's not necessarily true, but there's evidence to support it. And the evidence in the study showed that certain hypotheses, in this case, the resource hypothesis, could help. So if it helped in one case, that shows that the hypothesis has some merit. I think this might be a right answer, right? Text 2 suggests that the success of invasive plant species is a costly problem if further research should be conducted. I don't think it ever says anything about further research, and it does say it's a costly problem, but that's not the main idea. That's not what the author of text 1 would say about the experimental results. I think he'd say this case shows that the resource hypothesis shows merit, and that would be C. Okay, 12. What does the text most strongly suggest about the conventional ETL fabrication? Okay. So again, this is kind of this is an explicit detail. We want to know something about conventional ETL fabrication. What's the idea related to that in the text? Central idea question, but it's focused on particularly conventional ETL. So in a paper about pin planar perovskite solar cells, don't know what that is, but they're going to tell us, one of several perovskite cell architectures designed to collect and store solar power. Okay, I know a little more. Lindsey Brown described a method for fabricating the cell's electronic transport layer, ETL, okay, so that's something we want here, with spray coating. So, okay. Don't know if that's conventional or not, but let's keep reading. This method of ETL fabrication is accomplished using a solution of nanoparticles with a spray coating fabrication. The process can result in a loss of up to 80% of the solution, increasing the cost of manufacturing at scale. An issue that may be obviated mean, rectified or improved on by conventional fabrication. Okay, so the spray coating is not the conventional approach. And the problems seem to have some issues here that the conventional will not have. It won't have the same problem, which the researchers describe as highly reproducible, concise, and practical. Okay, so the conventional fabrication is reproducible, concise, and doesn't have the problems of spray coating. So what do we have here? A, it is more suitable for manufacturing, that is conventional, more suitable for manufacturing large volumes of such and such solar cells than the spray coating method may be. Okay, that seems reasonable, in line with the ideas here. B, it is more expensive when manufacturing at scale than are processes for fabricating ETLs used in other perovskite solar. No, we don't even mention other solar architectures, so I don't know what that refers to. And it never says conventional is more expensive. In fact, it says it's reproducible, concise, and doesn't have the problems. There are no dollar costs given here either, so that's not right. It typically entails more loss of nanoparticle solution than do other established approaches. No, our spray coating, that's false. It says the spray coating results in a loss of up to 80% of the solution. Well, it does say cost. It increases the cost too, so there is some expense there. But B is the opposite idea of expense. So it's still wrong. Here, large loss of nanoparticles than do other established approaches. Not likely. Not likely. It says the other approach loses 80%. They don't directly say what this approach loses. Well, it does say the conventional approach can obviate that in fabrication. So it will not have that loss. So it has less nanoparticle solution loss, according to the text. That's not right. C. D, it is somewhat imprecise and therefore limits the potential. No, it says it's highly reproducible, concise, and practical. So that's not the idea. A is the right idea. It's more suitable for manufacturing because it doesn't have some of the associated problems, and it's highly reproducible, concise, and yes, it says it's basically lower cost. A will be our answer. Okay, 13. Which choice logically completes the text? Yes, so we're getting into the teens. It's typical that we're going to have command of evidence, inferences, which often appears as logically completing the text, like in this case. So let's take a look at what's going on. We have to read the whole paragraph and try to really assess the ideas here and boil it down to a simple logical statement. Denisovans lived at the same time as Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, but they are often regarded as the more primitive of the three. That said, archaeologists such and such and colleagues have argued that Denisovan society had reached a surprising level of sophistication that it differed from the culture of its cousins. So it was different, but it's surprisingly sophisticated. Okay? They didn't expect that. Tabuin has studied Denisovans' hunting rituals and noticed that they primarily hunted male animals. Why would that be important? Maybe it's part of their sophistication not to kill the female who would create new generations of the animals they need to hunt, I suspect. The team claims there's a potential social meaning behind the particular hunting patterns. Okay, in either case, it has social meaning, so that shows a developed society, and further claim that Denisovans might have participated in burial rites that held symbolic importance. So again, kind of a structured society with rituals. Overall, Tobin and her team's suggestions demonstrate that their society, the Denisovans, had a complex society. It was their own. It wasn't necessarily like the others, but it was their own, and it was sophisticated. That would be my guess. Let's look at the answer choices. Neanderthals were largely less developed in terms of... No, nothing here says the Neanderthals were less developed. We don't discuss the development of the Neanderthals here, so that's not right. It's a false comparison. There's no evidence for it. B, Denisovans were more like their evolutionary cousins than was previously believed. Well, no. Does it say that? I mean, they were thought to be the most primitive, and then it tells us they have a sophisticated society, which is a surprise. But it doesn't actually draw a comparison again to the others to say that they were like them. Okay, assuming that those are in fact their cousins. That could be tempting, I think, to a lot of students, but that's not right. It's not supported by the text. Contrary to popular belief, Denisovans had their own sophisticated society rituals. Yeah, the evidence shows that it was surprising. Therefore, the popular belief, and it says so, were that they were the more primitive of the three. So contrary to that, they had their own that's going to be our answer. Let's check D. Unlike Neanderthals, Denisovans had highly developed societies and their own ritual. Well, hold on. This says almost the same thing. They had highly developed societies and their own rituals. That's good. Unlike Neanderthals. Again, do we know Neanderthals did not have a highly developed society? I don't think it says that. That's kind of like A. What society or sophistication Neanderthals had is not part of the text. So that makes D wrong. C is the right answer.